Okay.
All right. All right.
Yeah. How's it go, everybody? And gaming fan here, and I keep
Exonex here too.
yeah. I was about to mispronounce the shit out of it right off the bat. Okay.
Well, luckily that's why I came in. So
Yes. So what will be
yeah.
today's topic? I already had the VTuber
Basic-
model and the thumbnail will be so confusing for some people.
All right. Well, the today's topic is basically we're doing the whole basically character analysis comparison, where this is going to be basically Makima and Shadow again, since we see there's more. We're going to explain later too, where we see there's more like basically they're more like when you think of the context. Given
Yeah.
that she was shaped to be a weapon and Shadow shaped to be a weapon, but the only difference is that Shadow had Maria. That's why he's not like that, because he has an attachment to show him that, you know, what feelings are like, and her, she just never got that in canon.
Yeah.
And
And
first we're gonna basically go about how people were making a comparison between her and Princess Bubblegum, but we're also going to show that contextually speaking, that doesn't really have much in common. Especially if you remove Dingy and Finn from the equation himself and just focus on those two on their own, then you're going to pretty much, see that they don't have a whole lot. For example, like you even told me yourself that Bubblegum is more controlling than Makima because anything someone else does, she literally has surveillance cameras all over, even outside her kingdom. She
yes.
alone wouldn't even let anybody basically even try to have their own will going on. Hell, that's why she made the can keep people stupid, because they'd be easy to control that way.
Yeah.
You see, that's another thing.
Even her adopted family. Well, technically they're
Even her
related
adopted
because
family,
they're made of the same like bubblegum like DNA, I guess. But
pretty
like,
much,
but still,
pretty much,
yeah, that's why on the internet. Yeah, I know we're talking about something that is super niche that only like five people talk about, but hey, we're
pretty
like
much,
we're half of those people. Este, and like the problem is like
right?
the comparison between Makima from Chainsaw Man and Princess Bubblegum from Adventure Time. People like to use the comparison, but technically
Uh huh.
it's not accurate as a character. It's very superficial. Mostly they hyper focus on Makima's treatment to Denji, which we already did a separate video why Makima is actually the good guy and
Right,
within the context. While Bubblegum
and not
treatment to
inherently evil.
Night Hero Evil, while Finn's treatment, I mean, previous Bubblegum's treatment to Finn, they only focus about that specific angle, while in reality, I would dare to say, like, Princess Bubblegum fits more accurately with the Control Devil than Makima herself. And
Right.
hell, I'm more familiar with Adventure Time than you are. And people who watch
I'm
Adventure
very
Time,
familiar with it.
and people who watch Adventure Time will know the episode where they go to like the primordial state, with like their primordial like pure essence, who they are by instinct. And when Princess Bubblegum turned into her own primordial state, the first thing she does is to take control of everything, basically world domination off the bat. you know,
I mean,
well,
that's another thing about that too. Is that here's another thing about like bubblegum that we also want to get cleared out, is that bubblegum from the start, like she was never raised to be a weapon. That's just who she is. Because I've seen an episode where basically you see her back in her earlier days where
yes,
she made her family and shit, and where she made the setting, but she was also trying to like take control of them too, because she wanted to like rule.
yes,
Well, like you got to get with Makima, is that Makima doesn't want control for control's sake. She just saw that as a means to an end to achieve world peace, at least her version of what she wanted to be world peace. It's just that it's just through domination control, but that's not alone what she really wanted. And the fact that, again, like I mentioned before, her being shaped to be a weapon. However, Bubblegum, on the other hand, she made it very clear that she doesn't really, her main focus is not to have a huge, like a genuine connection with somebody, unlike Makima. Bubblegum's main objective is basically just to rule things and basically be a tyrant. Hell, even in the show, I forget the name of that one character. They even put the name tyrant. I think even Marceline called her a tyrant.
yeah, Marcelly, Corsair Tyrant,
Yeah,
and also Princess
yeah,
Bubblegum is the only character in the history of Cartoon Network, right?
right,
That she was labeled as a fascist.
exactly,
I ain't talking about not fascist, but like from the fan base or the community. I mean, in-universe characters. Like
right. Yeah, because
of course,
basically,
it's only one time, but the audacity that Cartoon Network was like they approved this decision
Mm,
creative right. Oh, we gotta do like a protest episode. Okay, you have a sign for purpose? Yeah, like she's a fascist. And they're like, yeah, that sounds about right. It's like
yeah, see, and that's another. Yeah, but see, but that's another thing because Princess Bubblegum, unfortunately, that's to make it even worse. Because I remember another YouTuber who he literally listed everything bad thing that she's done, especially including the shit that we didn't even see on the screen. For example, like that one episode where Princess Bubblegum, she takes people. She even has her own evil advisor. I guess I'm supposed to call him that because he's the only one that's not dumbed down, and she has him run shit for her where she literally has him keeping shit in range and check with her kingdom. Hell, she even basically went to the Fire Princess's kingdom for no good reason, causing genocide,
yes,
and
and
then wanting to take out the core because in the name of control too. You see, that's another problem.
yeah,
And then even her own robot army, she did the same thing to them when they decided to have their own will to do her own shit. She straight up committed genocide on them too. And that's where I dare I say, it's like the things that the things that Bubblegum have done, they basically make it very clear that like, especially like for example, another good example I could use where she made use that other creature, put her DNA in it, but yet it wants to rule everything. You see,
oh yeah,
that's another problem.
you talk about
Yes,
like that.
yes,
I don't want to say if the Griffin, but no, yeah, Griffin is the accurate term for it. If
yeah,
where there were two Griffin, one base of Princess Bubblegum's DNA and the other base of Finn's DNA, because the Bubblegum one was like, I'm gonna be a tyrant and be a dictator immediately. I mean, not immediately, but like the moment he
right.
discovers like the power of tyranny, that was like, okay, I gotta be a tyrant now. Like, it's like the no hesitation,
They
like no hesitation. Well, she had to make another Griffin with Finn's DNA, who is basically by his own nature heroic. So it's like, okay, this is this is clearly the bad guy. I
right.
need to stop it. So it's
Right.
like,
And see, that's another thing. See, because that's another thing. Because see, because that's another thing too. Like for example, like I remember, like we both talked about how Micah feels about humans. Look at how Princess Bubblegum feels about like other people that obviously on her and her kingdom aside from Marceline. She literally doesn't give a shit, even with Finn and Jake, obviously, because like for example, with Marceline, she's the only one, and I hate to say it, but her relationship with Marceline was pretty rough. I mean, I remember she even called Marceline a monster or something like that. I'm like, okay, that's kind of fucked up
which
to
is
say
fucked
somebody that's
up.
supposed to be liking you.
Yeah, which is fucked up because, like I said, within the context of Adventure Time, where there are, I don't want to say literal
Hmm.
monsters, but like, for the sake of it, right? Like, there's non-human creatures dominate the planet at this point.
Right.
As the calling her a monster, it's basically their version of a slur. It's
It
like,
really is. It really
and
is.
which is it sounds weird, but think about it. If you live in a non-human population where there's like a bunch of werewolves, magical beings, and stuff like that, you don't like the idea somebody calls you a monster, even though you're like the most common thing in the area. It's the
And see, that's another thing too. No, but see, that's another thing too. Like again with Bubblegum, she made it very clear that people, she just want them to follow her. And
Yeah,
then not only that, she, like you just said, when she became primordial, that was her main thing that she stepped into. Not even for like to make things serene. It was just basically to make them become a part of her. You know.
yeah.
Then they basically may have their form for real, but then they're being just like the people from the Candy Kingdom. They don't have their own mind together. Which is another topic I want to jump onto. Is that like when she didn't want the I forget the name of this too, but she didn't want them to get married, and she was
Oh,
trying to lie and say the king didn't like have the papers or whatever. But even was proven that he did, she still had them locked up for no reason. So it's
oh yeah. Even though
like
he was right about everything, he had the legal
right.
documentation, and he was also a
Mm-hmm.
rightful ruler himself. Which is
Right.
within. I know Adventure Time is not super It is weirdly kind of political at times, weirdly enough. But like when they
Kind
do
of.
introduce it, like he was like following procedure. It's so
Right.
it's like, look, I have the documentations, I get the approval because I'm from this kingdom where she is my citizen, she has the right to do this. And Bubblegum was like, nope.
Right.
It's like, no, I don't care. It's
Oh, and
the
here's another problem. Oh, and here's another fucked up thing. Here's another fucked up thing. Remember that one episode where basically Bubblegum talking about her first child was a failed experiment? Like, you know how fucked up this to
Oh,
say it
oh
is to
yeah,
say your own child is a failed experiment. Lemon grab, and
yeah,
then
but
you see Lemon grab resents her, and you understand why he resents her because it's like, okay, that's not cool.
yeah. Let me
And then
clarify.
she,
Let me clarify that because some people will hear that like since when Bubblegum had a child. Remember,
I
she's
know
she's like a she's like a Frankenstein type of scientist, so she's like artificially
she
create
is.
her own children based on DNA. Like we mentioned about the Griffin one
Uh huh.
earlier, like the Griffin one. So Lemon Grab and the descendants of Lemon Grab are the byproduct of the similar experiment, right?
Uh huh.
Este,
Yeah.
and it doesn't help the fact that all of them turn out to be very unstable mentally, and also like they're
Right.
also basically control freaks themselves, just like the mother. Este, which in complete
And
contrast, I
saying
already
nothing.
oh, go on. I will continue later.
I was gonna, no, I was just gonna say like that. I was gonna say like what doesn't even help is that like the thing about bubblegum to be most is that even with like lemon grab and then when she created him, she basically even then still looked at him as like a failed experiment. Of course, like you said, for Arthur's creating him, and then it doesn't even help that in the later episode where we get introduced to another one she created named Lemon John.
Yes.
And this is going to get dark, but it doesn't even help that Lemon John was looking up to her to like take care of him, but instead she just kind of set him up to basically face an unfortunate fate. And then she started selling him as lemon candy to the Candy Kingdom.
So
And
yeah,
that's
so
supposed to be
she
like her grandchild.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's pretty
like
fucked
she
up that she did that to her own grandchild.
which yeah, como well, yeah, she didn't eat her own grandchildren or children, but the audacity that she sold her own kids.
Actually, actually, I hate to break it to you, but she actually did eat her own grandchildren. As fucked as that sound, because she ate one of the candies, the lemon candy of him.
Oh, but I completely forgot about that. But like, yeah, like, but
Yeah,
I remember the part where she sold the lemon candy, even though that's literally her children, which is like that's what I want to say earlier. We already did a video about why Makima is the good guy within the story. That's why the comparison between Makima and Bubblegum is not really good comparison. Besides the very superficial, like how Makima's
Finn and
treatment
Jake. I mean,
yeah, with
Finn and Dingy.
the affinitation with Makima, and because like Makima, I gotta repeat the thesis again, but like to make it shorter, because I was focusing more on the world building consequences of it. Este, if we were going to be
Right,
consistent writers, Makima was raised as a weapon by the government, right? And
right.
despite being raised as a weapon, her purpose to be as a weapon, and because of this, because of her psychological trauma, and she doesn't really have the ability to control her devil power, which is the irony, right? A controlled devil can control her own powers. They're basically on autopilot for the most part. Este,
Yeah, she's in that attached mindset because of the government. So
yeah, and despite being raised as a literal child soldier, right? You think that would be the perfect catalyst of a villain, similar to Homelanders. It has a similar upbringing, right? But
right,
instead of that, she still wants world peace, a world without war, hunger, famine, even death. And because of her, although she doesn't have to get the direct credit, but she approves the changes, like a world where Nazis don't exist, a world where asthma doesn't exist, a war where AIDS don't exist. So she saved off screen, like lore wise, like she saved around 300 million people, like 200 to 300 million people
but
off screen.
and I was also gonna add that I was also gonna add too, basically, there's another thing too is that she legit did want a family. It's just
Yes.
unfortunately because again she's in it because she was raised to be a weapon and attached mindset, and that's where we'll get more into that between her and Shadow later on. Is that all she knows is control, so she thinks the only way to really get close to people is through control itself.
Yeah.
Because like again, that's literally all she knows because she's in that detached mindset. She doesn't that's why anything's on the table because for her to achieve her goals because that she's just looking at what's efficient in terms of what's efficient.
Yeah. Even though,
And
like I said,
again,
And even though, like I said earlier, with our previous video, because of this, because she was raised as a weapon, she has signs of like what happened to real life child soldiers. Probably has signs
Right.
of PTSD, fear of losing attachment, suicidal tendencies. At least you can interpret suicidal tendencies when she wanted
Right.
the chainsaw devil to eat her, which is erase her assistant. You can interpret that as her being suicidal. Este,
But see, that's another thing. No, but it's another thing too, because like I said, with her is that again, Makima actually wants good things.
yes.
It's just that unfortunately she doesn't really know how to get that because again her whole point for her obsession with the chainsaw devil was because she thought because she thinks in terms of power dynamics and that's all she knows, that's why she thought that he would be the one to give that to her because that's what she literally thinks through
Well,
that kind of detached
all
mindset.
other
And it
things,
was just more for projecting.
yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say like it's more for projecting what she wanted onto the chainsaw devil, which again, that's not how gene connections work. But again, she wouldn't know that because she was raised to be a weapon,
No, no,
and because
because
of that, that's why she,
another
she ended up
thing,
doing that.
she
What?
basically fell in love with the Chainsaw Devil because he was basically he was the only devil to be like an actual heroic figure, and Makima is like one of the very, 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 very few devils we know in the series that has a positive view of humanity, unlike all the other ones who are either don't care or just straight up hate it,
Well, the
right?
problem is,
And,
well, the problem is with that. No, but the problem
wait,
is,
wait,
no, I
wait.
was gonna say the problem is
Like
what?
and not done. Because of this, she also had not only she basically fell in love because she considered like almost a hero, but she got the false impression that he was like a an uncontrollable weapon, right? And she thought if I could turn him into a gentle giant for a force of good, we can solve the devil problem, without realizing that he's already a gentle giant, so to speak, right? Este, and because of her upbringing, despite her personality, like very domineering, right? She's actually
Right?
socially awkward. She doesn't really know how to talk to people. Like people often forget about
Outside
that.
of
Outside her, people
outside
who
of
she worked with,
yeah, yeah.
no,
Yeah,
that's what.
outside of like her job being head of the public safety bureau, yeah, in the public, that's where she's like, as an individual, she doesn't know how to do that. And another thing too is that, like I was gonna say, like her view of humans, like that's another thing I wanted to get into. Like, for example, the reason why she looks at humans as pets and whatnot. Now, I know a lot of people misinterpret that as like her just basically, looking purely from like the whole like only superiority thing. But here's another thing to add on to that. It's less of just basically like being a devil null and being a domineering. It's more the fact that because of the types of humans that she's surrounded by, she's surrounded by nothing but selfish people, very, very
Yes,
selfish people. And the only kind of people that come to her are the ones who obey her or the ones who fear her, or should I say people that I should say that have the perception of her, or the ones that come to her because they want something from her, just want to use her, or people who desire her, or admire her. And
yeah,
because of that, that's also another reason why she kind of fell in love with the chainsaw devil because she knew that you'd be immune to her control, and she thought that that would be her way to get what she wanted, like basically a genuine connection. But you see, as you can see in the canon version, of course, that's kind of like, and I'm gonna get into this in a second. Why another reason why, like we were talking about, like bubblegum and Makima aren't exactly the bit like it's like you just said, it's a superficial comparison. Is that like the main reason why, and unfortunately I have to go this route, and I know some people are going to be like, ugh, this might be controversial, but it's kind of true because I read a thread about this and I thought about it. And I was like, that's actually kind of true. Is that like, for example, her relationship with Denji? Yes, she treated Denji badly, but at
you
the
would,
same
yeah,
time, like from that perspective on his end, he doesn't really like. For example, I've discussed this with you too, and I even asked you that question. Denji just likes the idea of being with Makima. Like he's the type that just desired her. He doesn't really care about her as a person, just so much what she represents to him. Because
yes,
anytime he would be around her, it would just be because he just wants to feel important. He wants to fill in that void. That's the only reason why. As far as concerning himself with her well-being or what's going on with her as a person as a whole, he doesn't really concern himself too much with that. Even at the movie theater, he doesn't really concern himself when she was crying over there. He doesn't question it. He just continues watching the movie.
yeah,
Which I hate to say this, but I might as well say it now. Like, because the thing, nothing about Mike was that she didn't trust anyone, not even Denji. And I hate to say this, but in a way, it's kind of like, at least on that part of it, it's a little bit justified in that because in a way, like unintentionally, of course, he was just kind of just using her because he just wanted to fill in a void what she can offer to him.
Yeah.
And then what doesn't help from that point is that that's kind of the reason why she wasn't vulnerable around him too, because then she would just look at that like he would just unintentionally do the same thing with for vulnerability, start using that. So it's like, yeah, that's kind of another reason why she didn't really, show her real self to him like that. You know what I'm saying? Like her, like the part of her that does want, a genuine connection.
Yeah. Like
Plus,
even
that's another, yeah.
like
I was
even
gonna say like that's another reason.
go on. Sorry.
Go ahead. Now I was gonna say like that's another reason why she didn't take Denji seriously, because like you even say yourself, his liking her is just juvenile. Like I said, he's not like Makima as the person. He even worship her and whatnot, but that's the problem. He's just projecting. He just like she's basically just something for him to fill a void in. Not really so much because like you even told me yourself, there's no point in the manga in the part one where he actually tried to like genuinely reach out to her. It's just him being horny, unfortunately, and then
And
just
still
basically him just
is.
desiring her, and that's pretty much it.
Still is after part one, but
That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and see, and I hate to say this, but like another comparison, like for example, like okay, let me go back to Bubblegum and Finn. Like Finn, he liked Bubblegum, but he actually cared for her well-being, you know, and he generally did want to work things out with Bubblegum, but then he just saw, at least he saw for himself, that that wasn't just going to work out. So then eventually he would move away from Bubblegum or just move on from Bubblegum because he saw that that relationship was toxic. Which
Yes.
which another thing I need to bring up real quickly too with Denji's thing about like him going to her because he wants to feel important. Even that behavior in itself is toxic, because if you feel okay with who you are, you wouldn't need to go and lean towards someone else to basically fill in that void. Like you're feeling in something, that's basically empty. You know what I'm saying? Like, because if he truly felt who he is at his core, he would need to do that. That itself is a toxic thing, which also is a reason why his relationship with Makima is not toxic. The toxic relationship. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
But that's the
Because another thing I want to point out, yeah, because another thing I want to point out too, real quickly about the whole Chainsaw Man thing in part one is that I know a lot of people do focus on the abuse of Denji and whatnot, and we don't deny that, and we discussed in that video, and of course, the outcome of what happens next. But the truth be told is that people do treat the relationship between her and him like it's a black and white thing, but it's really not black and white at all. Because both sides, because again, if we're talking about the abuse itself, that is Makima, but then if we're talking about the relationship dynamic alone, specifically between her and him only, that's where things take a different turn, because either side is not really in the right. Denji's unintentionally using her, and she's intentionally using him. It's basically a transactional relationship, you know,
yeah.
and that's all it really is. It's
It
just that, like I said, he ended up being on the receiving end of it, and then he just had to deal with the aftermath. But the truth is about that is, like, unlike Finn, where I would say he's a sympathetic victim because he genuinely wanted to work things out with Bubblegum, and she was just using him, while Denji was using Makima unintentionally, and she was using him. So it's like, that's another thing that makes it superficial, because Denji's not really quite in the same boat as Finn either, if we're gonna go by that too,
yeah. I think
just that effect alone.
yeah, but that is the problem because,
Yeah.
like I said, for Cheetah, which is the Chainsaw Devil for people who never read the manga
Right.
or watch beyond the
Right.
first season, is the like
Right.
he said it himself that Makima all she wanted was a family and a loving partner.
That's all.
Denji really really care about
He
that,
just he just
and
wants sex.
yeah, in the second part, like if they when they introduce the Chainsaw Man church, right? When they talk about, oh, if you gotta join the church, you have to marry somebody, or at least have to be in a committed relationship. He was like, no, I just want sex. But I'm oversimplifying, of
And
course.
see, and that's another
But
thing.
wait.
That's another thing. No wait, no wait. I need to point this out real quick. That's another thing too. I just know. That's another thing too. I need to point out too. Even if things between Denji and Michael were good, the moment it would have came to that part about having a family, he would have immediately would have been like, no. You see, like that's another problem. Even if things were good, it would still would have been ugly either way.
Yeah,
He'd just been like, no.
and
Like
remember,
even then, the moment it
and
just would have twisted right then.
yeah, but I remember, and I remember somebody pointed out, like, her abuse of Denji is like a repeat the cycle thing, like similar to her own upbringing by the government, right? Because if you gotta raise
Pretty much.
somebody as a weapon, as a soldier, let's for people who don't know, for whatever reason, if you gotta raise a child
Right.
soldier, abuse is part of the way to do. I hate to say it, but you're not gonna raise a child soldier without abusing the poor victim in the process,
Right.
right? Like physically,
Right.
mentally, psychologically, and sadly in some cases in real life, sexually at times. If they're like
Oh,
her
yeah.
upbringing as a weapon,
Be
she had
careful, dude. Don't get, dude. Don't get this video. Don't get this video flagged. Don't get
very,
this video flagged.
okay, but like I already said one time, so it's a one time word they all rule they have weirdly enough.
Okay.
But
Just make sure. Just gotta make sure.
like these things happen, and her upbringing as a child soldier, definitely she has, like I already mentioned, she does have signs of PTSD, fear of attachment, like emotional issues, right? If the suicidal tendencies, addiction, although in this case caffeine addiction, like she always drinks coffee, este, and a smoker, right? And despite all that, instead of becoming like Homelander, who's just straight up psychopath, she still wants to do the good
Pretty
thing
much.
in a very Machiavelli way, right? Este,
Right.
and even after everything that happens, like I already mentioned, thanks to her, or at least she at least approved of the changes that happen. Like there's no AIDS in the Chainsaw Man
Right.
universe. Like the fascism never doesn't really exist in the Chainsaw Man universe. Asthma doesn't exist in the Chainsaw. So there's no World War II. There's no genocide, at least since World War One, right? If the like she basically saved
Right.
like a good like almost 5% of the global population off screen, right? Este,
But
and
right.
even after all that, you know, she does admit herself rarely that the people in government, she actually fears them because they control her and because of her upbringing, right? Like the abuse she has to witness, right? Este,
Hmm.
and even she doesn't know in the story that the gun devil works with the government, the same devil that she tried to hunt down. And the government's on a mission that Makima wants world peace. We are against that by their own admission. So it's been established.
Right.
It's been established, even though it's just a one offhand comment, but that one off comment just basically proved in a very indirect way that Makima, on the big picture, is actually the good guy in the story, and Denji and the other people who he joined accidentally, because they don't know this, accidentally joined the bad guy side. You know,
See, that's
it's
another thing too. No, but it's another thing. No, but it's another thing too because no, because like again with Makima is that like you just said, she wanted a family, she wanted good things. It's just her way of the story. It's just she had a distorted way of getting it because she was raised to be a weapon. All she knew was control. Well,
yeah,
Bubblegum doesn't want world peace.
not
She
really.
doesn't even want to create a positive environment. All Bubblegum wants is basically just to, like you said, run everything on her own whim.
Well,
Basically, a tyrant.
hell,
I mean, she was really called a fascist.
she literally did a plague. They create a play to launch up another alien civilization because she was like, "Oh, there's aliens. I assume they're
Hmm.
the enemy, so I gotta do a genocide before that happens." Even though she never even bothered to contact them whether or not they're friendly. It took I forgot the name, the elephant, the elderly elephant, the character. I forgot her name right now. The
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, which is also the same character who called her a fascist. That's so weird, funny enough. And this is the same one. It's like she's like, "Hey, stop doing that. Those are my kids." Wait, they're your kids? Yes. By the way, she's like she has like 5 husbands or something. Has like a ton of kids. That for an elderly lady, she goes around in Adventure Time.
See,
It's
but
the
see, that's another thing too. But let me point something out too. Bubblegum is that again another reason why we do if we want to do comparison. Like I said, when you ignore Denji and Finn from the equation, Bubblegum again, her main goal is just to basically be a tyrant. She doesn't care about making things right or making things turn to a peaceful thing.
no.
Her main because again that's the difference. Bubblegum was never raised to be a weapon. She wanted bad things from the start. There
Yeah.
was no point where she was conditioned to be anything. She chose this life. That life wasn't shaped.
Yeah.
Like government, she is the government. The leader, she is the
Literally.
leader. She's the one running everything. Yeah, like I said, she's the one running everything. And then not only that, she basically likes to torture folks for fun and experiment on them.
And
You
she's
see,
also
that's
and she
another thing about Bubblegum.
and she's also a huge hypocrite because she is very
She is
she's very discriminatory towards magic and magical people. Yeah, at the same time,
right.
she secretly practiced magic herself. Like like f you.
Like I said, yeah, and then not only that, and here's the kicker: her brother, she has a brother that she kept alive. She uses his life force to power her kingdom. Now, how does that sound?
That
How
is
does that sound?
I can't.
It's like
And I know this other information. It's never been confirmed. That's more like a fan theory. You know, like it's
what?
probably
What?
unlikely. You know, the planet of Ood from Adventure Time, the planet that the entire story takes
Oh, you're
place
talking about that one part. You're talking about that. You're talking about that one part where part a piece was missing on that part, and we don't know whether or not Bubblegum had any involvement in
on.
that.
Yeah,
Which, yeah, we don't
basically.
know for sure.
My
Yeah, I know.
I just assume because of the people who don't watch Adventure Time, there was like a nuclear the apocalypse that happened before the events of the show, and some people just assume, oh, that giant gap that missing on the planet, that maybe that's where all the bombs show up at the same time. I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But knowing Princess Bubblegum, I'm like, you know what, maybe Princess Bubblegum has something behind that too.
And that's another thing I want to point out Princess Bubblegum. That's another thing I want to point out Princess Bubblegum. Everybody, she just see them as something for her to basically either experiment on. Even when there was a zombie play going on, she was
Oh,
doing that just so yeah, she was doing that shit because she wanted to, she basically was gonna cause the apocalypse. And
quite.
then she was trying to like, use that so she could enforce things. Like I said, Bubblegum is a tyrant. While
Yeah.
Makima is just someone who was shaped to be a weapon but really wanted good things, just had a story of getting it. Well, Bubblegum just straight up want to be a straight up tyrant.
No,
Like again, she was the government. She is the one who wanted to be a dictator,
she is like
basically.
the literal stereotypical big brother from George Orwell's 1984. I hate that I had to bring that up because that's such a meme at this point. Oh, it's like 1984 from George Orwell. In her case, she's like a textbook example. In her case, what makes it even worse, the only thing that's stopping Bubblegum from straight up world domination, like straight up being the main villain of the series, is Marceline. Like she is the only
Yes.
character that basically
Oh, and here's another thing, dude. Here's another thing. Remember, she tortured Simon,
I was
and
about
yet
to bring that
Marceline
up.
never knew about it.
I was about to bring
Yeah,
that up. And
yeah. That like if Marceline knew, man, she would be dead.
literally,
Like,
for people who don't know, for whatever reason you watched this video without knowing anything about Chainsaw Man Adventure Time, first of all, why? Second of all, the
right,
context is Marceline was raised by the Ice King before he went insane, and the crown basically he is
right,
basically, not in a literal sense, but like it's a metaphor of somebody who suffers from dementia or amnesia, right?
right.
The Alzheimer's and stuff like that. It's like a metaphor for that. So Simon, aka the Ice King, doesn't have memory. Like he doesn't memory of raising Marceline. Like, but she sees him
Mm.
like a dad. They have this father and daughter relationship going on, right? Uh, and Princess Bubblegum just basically torture an old man with Alzheimer's. So,
That's not good. That's not good.
which that's another list of like, okay, like hell, Makima. We can talk shit about Makima if we want to, especially how she did to Denji, but she never tortured an old man with Alzheimer's. Come on, as the and
Outside of the dingy abuse, I mean, what else can you really say aside from like what you want to talk about when she tried to deal with the yakuza and shit? But aside from that, it's like,
yeah,
yeah, you can't really say much else. You
not
can't really say
really.
much else.
And Marceline never knew about the torture to begin with. So if she knew
Yeah,
about
but
that, I think that's the
oh
only time
no,
where, if she knew about that, I think that would be the only time where Marceline may actually go out of her way to just kill off a
oh
character,
no,
which in this case would be Bubblegum. And remember,
no, and that's another
she
thing. And
she
see, here's
she
another thing. No,
and remember she has killed people before. Like she is a vampire. She
no,
has
but
done it before.
yeah, but here's another problem with that. No, but here's another problem with that. Bubblegum has legit used. She legit in one episode used like some kind of laser beam where she turned folks into candy and then she'll just eat them. She's done that before. She's done
Yeah,
this shit before.
yeah,
You see, that's another thing. Bubblegum
which is
eating
cannibalism.
people. And let's be honest. Let's be honest. If Finn was transformed, or if anyone, for even Jake, if they were both, if they were like transformed to candy, who's to say Bubblegum won't just eat them?
No,
Like,
not only that, she also has another thing. I can't remember if it was a gun or not, but I know remember she has another thing that purposely turned people stupid. So like the entire
Exactly.
population of the Candy Kingdom, the reason they're pretty dumb, that's on in universe explanation. They explain real that's on purpose because she doesn't like the idea that
Dude,
people are
you
smart
know what?
enough to overthrow her.
You know what? I think another perfect thing that would speak for itself. Why don't you show short clips of Classic Man David where he was going through all the bad shit that Bubblegum was doing? He has like
Yeah,
at least 12 parts.
yeah.
He has at least 12 parts. You
There's
can
like
just go after those.
I don't think I'm allowed to do that for two reasons. Not because Classic Demon will copyright me, because we use Cartoon Network footage, and probably Cartoon Network stuff like us
Right.
instead of Classic Bad D, because
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Fair enough. Fair
instead of Classic Bad D is us getting flagged because fuck you, I guess.
enough.
That's how it works.
No, but the but no, but the but no, but the bottom line is that bubblegum, she like you said, she's a hypocrite, and then not only that, if she legit can't get what she wants out of somebody, then she'll force it out of them. She'll do shit like that,
Yes.
and then not only that, like people aren't allowed to think on their own.
Yeah.
She always try to run shit in her own kingdom and try to legit keep shit in her own type of command and direction.
Yeah.
That's another thing about Bubblegum is that she tries to control other kingdoms. They ain't got nothing to do with her kingdom. And then she'll just straight up like go over there. Even Flame Princess called her like sociopathic or something like that. And she doesn't even deny it. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's the crazy part.
like
She
she
doesn't
doesn't
even
even
deny
give a
it. That's the crazy part. She doesn't
she's
even
just being
deny it.
her. That's how
And,
she puts it. That's how
and
she puts it. She's just being her. So
yeah, and she even like committed genocide in the Fire Kingdom because of course when I say genocide it's not gonna be so gory or anything because it's rated PG. But but the fact that we see one random
right.
citizen like fire citizen, right? Who just literally this well I want to say disintegrated, but like you flame out. Like his fire was gone because of the cold wind, and you see the other fire person just crying, like, no, it's like, we just witnessed a tragedy right in front of our eyes, and this is a kids show, by the way. It's the
But
where
that's another thing. But that's another thing. But that's another thing. Bubblegum. That's another thing. Bubblegum. Like I said, the list of crimes of Bubblegum is done. The list of crimes of this bitch is done. She's already experimented on people without the consent. She's already basically committed genocide. See, and that's
multiple
another thing too
times.
that no, but I was gonna say that's another thing too that I think is kind of stupid comparison. Manga was never really committed genocide at all. Even people
No.
trying to make a comparison. She never committed genocide, but Bubblegum, like you just said several times, she ate her own grandchildren. Bubblegum did. Lemon John. She called her own grandchild, not grandchild. Well, she would have called him that. She even called her own child a failed experiment. Like, okay, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
And on top of that, she made her own family, and then she the one who made them all be dumbed down because she was just trying to, control them too. And
Yeah.
then what makes it even worse is the fact that Bubblegum, she even, and I really hate to go this direction, but she even basically was trying to, because she literally had cameras watching you know what? That's voyeurism because she's literally got cameras of every other kingdom where people were doing shit.
Yeah,
She's keeping everybody under.
that is another thing
Yeah,
where
that's
it's like
voyeurism.
illegal surveillance,
Yeah,
genocide, cannibalism, intervention of other countries, doing terrorism of other countries. Look at what happened with the Flake Kingdom.
pretty
It's
much. Pretty
it's
much.
the experimentation on their own citizens. Without the consent.
Right. Right.
Torture elderly men with Alzheimer's. In this case, the Ice King.
Right.
We have to be very specific. Not just torture. Torture of elderly Alzheimer's patient. Este,
I mean, he's not the
este,
only one.
I know, but you get my point. Try
And
try to kill their
and what it,
trying to kill her
and
own family.
oh, and here's another character. Another kid. I remember this is another episode of the Candy Kingdom. A candy kid. I guess that's weird to say it. Yeah, a candy kid was like he was trying to like ask Bubblegum for help or something. The only thing Bubblegum did was laugh in his face,
Yeah,
basically being pretty much like any type of helplessness he needed. She was basically just tormenting that, and this is her just being straight up sadistic. So it's like, okay, that's fucked up.
I know
Like
that
that's another thing. It's
that
like Yeah,
that's why
bubblegum. That's
that's
not a
why
good thing.
after
That's not a good
everything
thing.
we just lay out, plus the previous video when I mentioned why Bucky was the good guy, I just repeated here, just the previous video, I just focused more on the world building consequences if we were going to be
Hmm.
consistent with the implications. Which, spoiler alert, if like if it was consistent with the right, the world is like a more peaceful, better place overall. But like
Right.
she practically not almost reached her goal, but she was already very close to the goal she was getting to world peace to begin with. So blame the agency that she actually works. She was basically forced to work with. It's the funny enough the same
But
organization that was supposed to prevent it or the ones basically making it continue. But that's why for
which
go on.
Oh, no, I was gonna say which is gonna bring me to again with comparison between Makima and Shadow, which we're gonna explain. We're gonna get into why that comparison makes more sense,
I was
or
about to say that.
in the context. Yeah, because basically, again, like we already discussed about like the reason why Shadow went down the right path because of Maria, because of Maria's influence. Now, if you reimagine Shadow without Maria's influence, he'll be nothing more than a weapon. Because just like Makima, him too, he was shaped to be a weapon.
Yes.
Like we even went through this before. He would have thought that vengeance or revenge is justice. He would have thought that friendship is a weakness. He wouldn't trust anybody. Makima doesn't trust anybody, especially not even Denji.
Yeah.
Shadow basically, he doesn't understand how empathy truly is or how that works. She herself doesn't experience know what that is actually how that actually works. Shadow would have seen people nothing more pawns and tools to achieve his goals. Same thing with Makima. She would have seen nothing more but that, like people as tools and pawns. Shadow would only do what he thinks is sufficient to achieve his goals too, even if that means eliminating somebody that he's working with. Same thing with her. Like I said, their comparison honestly makes more sense in context than Bubblegum because, again, like I already mentioned before, Bubblegum was never shaped to be a weapon. Bubblegum made those decisions on her own.
Yeah.
And Bubblegum truly doesn't want to connect with anybody. She just wants to basically control everybody. While Shadow and Makima, on the other hand, deep down, they're only doing what they were taught to do. They're only doing what they're conditioned to do. They're not necessarily evil in the sense of like just basically wanting to be this terror that goes amongst the people. Instead, they were rather just misguided and conditioned to be what they were shaped to be. And as I mentioned before, the only reason why that Shadows go down that path is because of Maria. Otherwise, then he'll be no bit different from Makima, really, truly. You know, because
Yeah.
like look for example. Like let's imagine like with the detached Shadow in a setting where he's running stuff, like he's in charge of stuff. Now, you and I both know that just like with Makima's position, like then they would worry whether or not Shadow sees him as disposable. You see what I'm saying? Then it'll be just like the same position that Makima's in. You see?
Pretty much, yeah.
And then
That's why the comparison of
yeah,
Makima and Shadow is actually more accurate. Funny enough,
yes,
and really, it's like if Makima was never raised as a weapon, or she found
right.
somebody in the story that actually cares about Makima on like Denji, or at least Denji tries to do it in another universe. She could have easily have a redemption arc, and join sides. Basically,
Right,
Shadow never lost Maria, right? If Shadow never lost Maria,
right,
he could have been like another Sonic, like
pretty
similar,
much,
not exactly the same copy paste, obviously, but like
right,
another Sonic like character, like as
pretty
in like
much,
pretty like goody two shoes kind of ish, mostly because of Maria's influence. So it's like
pretty much,
the very classic, if we want to be obnoxious intellectuals, the nature versus nurture debate. Makima Shadow is based on nurture. Princess Bubblegum is in her nature to be an asshole. It's so
exactly. Because like I just said, because like I already told you before, there is one continuity of show who doesn't have Maria, and that's in the Boom continuity, which I hate that one. But it's like that's an example of him without Maria because in that one he sees friendship as a weakness. He sees people as nothing more but tools to achieve his goals, and will crush anybody who gets in his way. And like I said, he's carrying that same mindset that Maki would basically has without that one attachment. Because the thing about Makima and Shadow, because they're shaping weapons, being attached is kind of their default mindset. Until they like both find the person that would show them what attachment is like, they're gonna know is just being attached, and that's gonna be it. Even like for example, even if Shadow wanted something good, and if he never met Maria, he would just have a distorted way of trying to get it like Makima, basically.
yeah,
Because then it'd be like he has respect for Blaze because she sees she's powerful with the Soul Emeralds, and then thinking that he could start, something with her, and then only for things to go downhill from there because that's not how genuine connections work. Like I said, even then, he would just be like her. So it's like Shadow would be nothing more than what he was shaped to be, and then unfortunately, in the long run, he would just, like I said, fall down the same path as her. Because again, he would just be nothing. He'd be nothing more in the mindset of being attached because he wouldn't understand what attachment is. And same thing with Makima, where she herself, all she knows is control, and all she knows is just basically to power dynamics, and thinks that obedience means connection. And Shadow would have just thought that like people who are his pawns would be like some kind of like way of like talking to people. So
Yeah,
that's
pretty
all that
much.
would have been basically.
Basically, like
Yeah, because
really,
like I said,
that
Shadow.
that's why Shadow and
Yeah,
Makima are a better comparison as characters, right? They have similar
right,
backgrounds.
right,
I don't want to say straight up similar backstory. There are obviously differences, but they're similar enough, right?
right,
And they came to similar conclusions, although in their own
right,
ways. Makima still wants to do good, just in a very Machiavellian way. While Shadow, like he stays neutral, but he doesn't want to do bad
right,
things. So it's like
right.
unless he's been manipulated to or tricked to by Eggman or the black aliens, which sounds racist.
The
Este
Black
one of
Doom.
the black dude.
Yeah,
Este,
yeah.
you
You could
know,
just say that. You could just say that.
I just forgot the name. Remember it's the Navy convention something they have. It's the Black Doom or Eggman where he got tricked into it or manipulated into it. He doesn't do it with he doesn't do it by his own conscience, right?
Right,
Look at the Sonic movies. Weirdly enough, the reason he's fighting against
right.
Sonic because Eggman was manipulating him to begin with, but once he found out what
Well, to be more specific, Gerald. But yeah,
Yeah, okay. The other robot, his granddad, if the
yeah,
once he found out, you know, when he regained his memory, because he did kind of have like an amnesia a little bit. Once he found out what was really going on, so he went out of his way to actually stop, the world ending omnicide. So he doesn't really want that. He got tricked into believing that. So Makima had a similar background where
mm,
she got raised as a weapon, falsely believing that's how the world works. Well, even though by her own
right,
instinct, she kind of knew by her own instinct, like, I don't really want this. A world without war, death, disease. I kind of prefer that, which goes against everything what the government raised her to believe in. So it's like there's that. Unlike Bubblegum,
yeah,
where it's like in her primordial state of pure instinct, it's like I'm more accurate control devil than you are. You're supposed to be the embodiment. you know, it's the
exactly. Like I said, yeah, because like I said, because the thing is, like I said, the thing is, like when people try to compare Princess Bubblegum and her, is like that comparison isn't like again, like we said before, it's superficial because they're just focusing on like Dingy and Finn uh, quote unquote to like Bubblegum and Makima. While like we both keep saying, like the more you remove Finn and Dingy from the equation, there's not really anything really truly to compare. Because again, like we already said, Bubblegum was never shaped to be a weapon. And two, like you already said, she was just being a tyrant. Bubblegum straight up just wanted to be a dictator, and that's all that was she was striving for. While like we both like just point out that Makima and Shadow make more sense because again they're both shaped to be weapons, and again, like we keep saying, like if Shadow never had Maria, then he'll be no different from Makima because then he wouldn't know what friendship is even like or even care to, and then he wouldn't trust anyone, and then he would only see people as pawns, and
yeah,
then he would just be doing what he was shaped to do. He
yeah,
wouldn't truly, like I said, like same thing with Makima. She's only doing what she was shaped to do.
yeah,
Because again, like I just said, if that version of Shadow was in charge of something, like I already mentioned before, that rule would be no different from Oculus because then he would worry whether or not he sees him as disposable.
yeah,
So it's like it would just be pretty much that. And then on top of that, he would have done whatever it took to achieve his goals. So it's
pretty
like,
much.
yeah, because he would be cold, calculated, and ruthless, just like Michael would be cold, calculated, and ruthless.
Yeah,
Like
and
I said, they would be both essentially essentially the same boat. Yeah,
there are very very few characters that Makima sees people somewhat equal, at least with actual level of respect, which will be Pochita, obviously Pochita, right?
right,
Kibichi, the world's greatest devil hunter. He's the only one that Makima doesn't see below him, below her. Este,
Kishibe. His name was
Kishibe.
Kishibe.
He's the only other character that Makima has some respect, unlike any other devil hunter.
Right.
And
Right.
they never stated, but I just assume because she's a movie buff, she's a
But
cinephile. I just assume she also has
uh-huh.
high praises to certain directors. Like this is like 1990s alternative Japan, so I just imagine she's like a big fan of Quinto
Oh,
Tarantino. I don't know.
okay. 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 I just think that's just a head canon. But yeah, it's
I mean, it makes sense for
like
her
I said, it's
character.
like fair enough. No, but like I said, it's like that's the thing about Makima is that people just focus purely on the control aspect and the situation with Denji. But the truth is, outside that, she got more going for her because those aren't the only two things that define her as a character. And people just kind of take that and then they just run with that mainly instead of looking at the bigger picture. Like they're so focused on the small shit that they don't look at the bigger shit, you know.
Yeah,
And two, like we already pointed out, that she never committed genocide on like Bubblegum, so you can't put her in that boat. You
and
can't
like I
say
meant,
that.
and like I mentioned earlier, give it the implications of the lore and the backstory we know, because certain things don't exist because either of her or she at least approves of it. Off screen, basically 5% of the global population has been saved because of it. So there's that.
And so, like I already mentioned before, is that like I said, what makes her in many, like I said, what makes her in many ways, again, with comparison with Shadow, is that like she like for one, she working for the government, and then two, she basically has her. I guess I could say like another thing that fits her more with him is the fact of how they're kind of both. What's the word I'm looking for? They both have a cold exterior,
Yeah,
But again, what makes that difference is that with Maria defrosting that coal exterior and Makima has no one to defrost her coal exterior, so it's like that's why she stays the way she does. Because like I mentioned before, the reason why she thinks the way she does of humans and stuff is because she's surrounded by nothing but selfish humans. And
yeah,
again, she was shaped weapon by selfish humans, so it's like that's why she has this way of thinking of them. And again,
yes,
the moment she would have encountered one that was selfless, and they don't ask for anything from her in return, then that would make her look at them differently. That would be the one person that she would look at them differently because
yeah,
then she would be like, huh, they're not like the others. And then that would kind of slowly, because I think another good comparison, at least for this specific moment, would be like how Rose Quartz from Steven Universe, she used to look at humans nothing more as pets too until she met Greg. That would essentially be the equivalent of like Michael being the right kind of person. Like, oh, you're not like the other ones, and then that's why she would not think that way anymore. Because like again, one thing I've noticed, like I know a lot of people don't pay attention to bigger shit, but it's like when you look at the broader scale of things, you
yeah,
start to see that basically like again, we acknowledge the shit that went on in Chainsaw Man Part One because of Michael, but at the same time, like again, her being a devil, and of course being the way she's shaped to be is that like I said, they focus mainly on only on specifically the negative aspects because I know the other people aren't going to talk about that, and the only ones who do acknowledge it from Boomstick and what's his name, Wiz from the Death Battles, like at least they acknowledge that there's certain people that like you said she respect, and then the things that she actually want are which aren't actually bad inherently. It was just the way she wanted to get to it. Like because literally her wanting world peace, like I already mentioned before, she thought control equated to peace, which of course obviously it doesn't, but it's just that's all she knows. Now again, the moment she would have had the right type of person that be her attachment, then she would see that control doesn't equal peace, because then she would see that everything requires control. You see,
yes,
much like how, like I mentioned before, again, Shadow Vada Maria, all he would know is power dynamics. You see, so then he would be thinking him being ultimate life form would mean everything because then all he would know is power dynamics.
yeah,
And him being Maria is the reason why he don't think like that, because he sees that power dynamics is in everything. You see, just like how she would think that way if she met the right kind of person. Like I said, it's just that people, when I look at the threads and stuff, they just focus mainly on the bad stuff, or they just focus on specific stuff that she's done, but then they don't look at the bigger picture that again, she's not inherently evil. It's just that unfortunately she doesn't have that right kind of person in her life. And like you and I already both agree is that Denji's just not that person. That's why she thinks with the shit with him.
yeah,
Because it's like, yeah, because like I said, it's like, yeah, what she's done, yes, the shit she's done was bad, but at the same time, you're acting like somehow she's worse than Bubblegum when Bubblegum committed genocide, but you can't say she committed genocide. You can't say Makima committed genocide. So it's like, well, that's just kind of a weird thing to just attack considering the other one did way more shit. Even the debating whether or not one part of that planet, if Bubblegum was even involved, part of it being blown apart or whatever. So it's like, okay, why are you gonna attack the one who hasn't even went this far? And the one, how long were people even defending Bubblegum for the longest time? And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Bubblegum?
I mean, that
It's
happened to
like,
that
it's
happened to
just,
other characters that only recently, well, like 3 years at least, if they like recently like they realize, oh, the good guy is actually the bad guy, or the bad guy is actually the good guy, like stuff like that. I think another famous example that's been around recently, and this is good
uh huh.
timing because the Delta Room chapter 3 or 4 just came out. Undertale, the
Hmm.
main character, technically there are three main characters. There's like if the character you play as, the one like his soul is inside the main character, right? At the end, because of the meta commentary, the player itself, right, is technically a third character. The one that I forgot the name, but like the ones inside the soul, right? People thought that that character was evil for the longest time, right?
Oh
but
no.
but
Right.
it turns out it's not evil. It's actually pretty much a victim of circumstances, right? And
Oh no.
it only becomes evil in the story if you, the player, which is the third character, does evil shit. So it just assumed that's just natural because she's basically a dead child, right? Like she doesn't know any
Oh.
better. It's being influenced by your actions, right?
Well, there
Este,
you go. There you go.
so it's like if you the player encourage the genocide run, which yes, that is the name, as the the character
Oh
turns
no.
like ridiculously world dominating evil because that's all it knows about, right? But if you go to the true pacifist route, which is actually the canon ending of the story, it turns out that the person is not that bad, right? It's just people had a false impression us because the people forget the meta commentary of the game. It's very abstract. It's a very deconstructionist view of of like traditional RPGs, right? So it's like people often forget about that.
Right.
It's the same thing. Oh,
Yeah, I know.
another example I could think of a
What?
character that
What?
is okay. The character still technically works, technically, but it's the again another example of victim of circumstances. Is Esdeath from Akamila Kill. The only reason she became who she is because of two things: her father and the demon blood that she consumed to gain her abilities. Right? Her father
Right.
was a social Darwinist, right? And raised her that only the strongest survive. We had to eliminate the weak and the pathetic and the like basically this tyrannical mentality, right? So she was raised with that
Right.
mentality from the start. And then when she drank demon blood, which it's been acknowledged, never directly, my add, but it's been acknowledged that it changed the characters' personalities. So that's why people who had the demon blood powers are very bloodthirsty, very psychopathic,
Right.
very like pretty much serial killers, right? Like they lose their humanity. Even then, even though when Aztec herself does evil shit in the story and repeats the same like principles of her father, in reality she doesn't even really believe that because every time we see her on screen with the people that she actually close to, she does the complete opposite of everything that she publicly says she does. Like protects the weak, being nice
Rightly
to
enough.
being nice to people. Like she really has principles. And when she fell in love with the main character, all she wants is actually retired from the kingdom, no longer do imperial shit, so she can stay with her partner. Sadly, that didn't happen in the story, right? But like it shows you that she's really not that evil, despite her upbringing. But because this is a comic that I'm talking about, is edgy as hell, so they're never gonna do really cool writing. It's all about hype. So it's like
Right.
it shows you an example of like another character who, when you really pay attention, is another victim of circumstances and still contains good in her. But because this is a comic that Kill I'm talking about, they're never gonna bother to explore
Right.
that. So
Of
it's.
course not. They're not gonna go into details like that in a more subtext manner.
I mean,
They're just gonna just keep it
remember
there in the lore.
it's a 2000s edgy anime. It's all about like shark war, like let's show fucked up shit. You know, yeah, let's be like berserk with it's that they missed the point of Berserk, why it is dark to begin with. It has substance. You know,
Right.
so you know that's the funny part.
I feel like we're getting off topic during the title of the video, and I feel like we're getting off topic because of the title of the video. No,
Okay.
but like we were saying again, with the whole situation that people were making comparison with is that Bubblegum again, like we already said, that shit is superficial if you're comparing it because of how thin and Bubblegum is compared to Makima and Denji. Now we go to the like we already mentioned, like we already went through with her and Shadow. It's like that comparison makes way more sense in the context because again, they were both shaped weapons by their own governments. The only difference is, like I said, Shadow gets Maria, and Makima doesn't get her. Unfortunately, doesn't get her own attachment, so then she
Yeah.
doesn't see anything outside of control, basically. So it's like that's how that shit basically went. So
Yeah.
because I mean because like if you look at all the threads in certain videos, because don't you remember that one video that I showed you, and you even said that that guy in the video, his reasons were kind of stupid because, like you said, if you just focus on one specific aspect, yeah, of course, but you look at the bigger shit, it's like okay, that's not the only thing that defines them. You
Pretty
know what I'm saying?
much. It's
Because
like
that's just ridiculous that people try to put their own reasons on
that,
stuff,
that
and
that's
I'm just
why
like,
that's why a good story in
go on.
fiction that's why a good story in fiction, you have to show the entire picture, right? uh, to see what's going on, right? It gives you a more dynamic storytelling, right? If the like hell, they even fixed that problem in Karate Kid of all fucking places. They fixed that problem. Like like I should you know, like
Yeah, I know.
the main villain of the first movie, Lord Johnny, right? He's like, oh, he's a bully, right? He's an asshole, right? That's why we must dislike the guy. But when we so if you see the series Cobra Kai, you actually see his perspective, and you're like, wait a minute, Rousseau, the good guy, is actually the asshole this whole time when you really think about it. It's like wait a minute, it's like
Yeah,
we were being
I
duped the
feel
whole
like that's a
time.
topic. I feel like that's a topic for another video if we're gonna go that direction. But yeah,
I know, but it is a good example. It's like if you only focus on one specific thing, oh, this character be an asshole in this specific scenes, and ignoring everything else. But of course, you're not supposed to like him. But if you get the whole picture, then you may have a different conclusion. You know. So that's
again,
why.
like no, because again, like I said, it's like people like to focus on bits and pieces of stuff, and then they just take that and just act like that's the whole entire thing when it's not. Because like I already told you before, people act like the situation changed. I mean, part one is black and white, but like I already pointed out, like that shit isn't black and white at all, real and truly.
No.
Like I already explained to you, like how Finn his relationship with Bubblegum, but then he genuinely wanted to actually create a connection, while Denji's just being horny and just basically using her filling the voids. Like
Yeah.
you can't really compare that part, to be
Yeah.
honest,
That's why. Like.
because I know like you put it individually.
That's why for people who, that's why you cannot say that to Shadow. It's like, oh, Shadow's evil because he hates Sonic and beat up Sonic a lot. Okay, but do you know his backstory? It's like, do you understand where
Right.
he, like, after you learn the backstory, you don't see Shadow as a villain. You know, like, yeah,
No, but like I was saying before, because
in certain continuity, he's more like a traditional villain. But in most cases, he's either neutral or an anti-hero, and sometimes anti-villain, right? But he's never a full-on
no, but
villain.
no, but here's the thing. No, but like I was gonna say, here's the thing, because like I know some people try to treat Makima's backstory or yeah, her background of being shaped to be a weapon. Like that's just a cheap excuse. But like I told you before, it's like if we're gonna go by that logic, then Shadow being shaped by a weapon by a gun, that should be treated like it's just a cheap excuse too. If you never met Maria, then you might as well treat that as a cheap excuse then.
Yes.
Because I mean, like I said, he's in the same boat as her. So why act like because I hate to say this, but the reason people do shit like that is because of bias. Because they just like attack a specific group, and then they just kind of ignore the fact that, like I said, Shadow's in the same boat. Like someone like him is in the same boat as that. Because like I said, then again, like I said, if he never met Maria, then he would be in the same boat of. Basically, oh, it's not Gerald's fault or Gun's fault. That's Shadow's fault. That as an excuse is actually. Yeah, but the thing is that he didn't really ask for that. Just like
No,
she
he
didn't really
never.
ask for this. So it's not fair to it's not fair to attack them if they never even asked for this shit to begin with. Because
Pretty
then if we're
much.
treating like it's a fruiting excuse, they're treating it like a fruiting excuse when really and truly they're just doing what they were taught. It's no different like you were just saying with a child soldier. Like, it's like or hell, like here's another bad example. Like someone shaped to be an assassin by birth. like you can't really put that on them considering they're just doing what they were taught. They go out and killing folks and slicing. It's easy to say, "Oh, that's just an excuse." When you fail to acknowledge that that's not really their fault. They're just doing what they're taught.
Pretty
You know what I'm
much.
saying? So it's
They
like
were literally,
you're putting something on someone.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were literally raised by birth to behave this specific way, and then you
Right.
blame the person to turning out that way. Like, are you gonna blame the person?
Exactly.
It's like,
Right.
and not blame the people who shape it that specific way. If it turns out that
Right.
if it turns out he had a normal childhood and still became who he is, then okay, now you can blame
That's
the character.
different. That's
You know,
different. Now that's different. That's different.
like that's different. Okay, so it's like Bubblegum
But
is like
now if they
it's the one
were,
example of like
yeah,
she had a normal
right,
childhood and then just went pure dictator mode because I guess her genes demands it. And her,
something.
yeah, like unlike Shadow and Makima, it's based on nurture, not nature. So it's
Exactly.
like I said,
Exactly.
that's where it gets stupid. I bet you ass, like I have no evidence to back this up, but I bet you ass that like people who condemn Makima and defend Princess Bubblegum are the same people who try to justify Thanos' decisions in the MCU.
I would bet you. I would bet you they would do the same thing. I bet you do the same thing. Even though you come in on the side, I bet you they would do the same thing. It's like these people are ass backward. That's just bias at its worst.
Yeah,
It's like you're gonna attack this
you know,
person, even though the shit he doing is on a much bigger scale.
yeah.
Like that's some bullshit.
At,
That's what I call
at,
bullshit.
at least the comic version of Thanos, like he is like I'm obviously the bad guy, like twirling mustache, like type of villain. Like you're not supposed to like me, you know. It's at least you're not gonna have another defenders of the comic version,
Not really.
But the
Not really. The comic version, he is not going to have any defense whatsoever. But in the movie, he has several for some reason. He
yeah,
has several.
it's like no man, you missing the point. Yeah, like he is a well written character. I get it. Like he's like the best written villain besides Kingpin, but that doesn't mean that his actions are good. It's like,
No, but or no, but it doesn't mean that you can. I mean, how do you defend homicide? That's literally everything.
yeah, I don't know. It's like
It's
it doesn't.
like and like again, like I keep saying, no, but like again, like I keep saying is that like you keep saying people condemn Makima, but yet people won't condemn Shadow, even though he'll be in the same boat of her if he didn't meet Maria. Yeah, people wouldn't do that shit. You see what I'm talking about? Like people would do some shit
Yeah,
like that, even though they would both be in the same boat. It's like this is some bullshit. You shouldn't really be condemning them. You should be like understanding their background and seeing that they just need that chance to get that path they never got with the attachment. Because let's be honest, dude. If Shadow never met Maria, for him to go down a good path, that's not something he could achieve on his own at all because
no,
again, all he knows is being attached. So
yeah,
it's like he would literally need Maria for that kind of shit, just like Micah would need that type of attachment so she could go down the right path. Like I said again, it's like you attacking her, but then yeah, like I said, I bet you these are the same people that would never attack Shadow. Again, like I keep saying, if you never had Maria, then they would just they wouldn't say shit. It's like okay, that's what I'm talking about. It's
pretty much.
like I say, even though like I said, they would just essentially be in the same boat. But yeah, it's like people like to be biased like that for some reason
Yeah,
because again, you know, it's just like I said, it's one of those things where it's like they both, or like I said, they're both in that case to shape the ways. Because like I know, like you just said, like if they're like if the person's like Bubblegum where they choose to be this way on their own whim, that's different. Same thing with Euron Greyjoy. He chooses to be that way on his own whim. That's different. But now
yeah,
the moments because they're just doing what they're taught, and really and truly outside of being attached, they don't really know any better outside of that. Yeah, then that's not really their fault. You say like then you can't put that on them
yeah,
because then it's not really fair. Which brings me to another thing that I think that's really stupid is that I do realize that people for some reason always attack the circumstantial villains that never got a chance to go down the right path. But the ones who are truly bad, like Euron Greyjoy or Bubblegum, yeah, people it's almost like they're on their side for some reason because they don't say shit. Well, with the exception of mine from Shield Hero, they don't say shit about those guys, and that's the kind of thing that kind of pisses me off. It's like, why you gonna go attack them? You don't want to attack the ones that are truly bad. That don't make no damn sense.
yeah,
Like you just said, comic version of Thanos, no defenses whatsoever. But it's like the movie version, you'll have all kinds of people defending on the side for some reason. Go figure. It's like this is that bullshit right there.
yeah,
Because like this don't make sense at all. It's like okay, that's just stupid. Like I
yeah,
said, it's like truly they should be getting that. Like I said, the ones circumstances that truly they should be getting the healing and help that they need instead of just being thrown further into the abyss. that's the fucked up thing that people like to do for some reason. So
Yeah.
it's like, I don't understand it. So I guess that's all we. I guess that's all we're gonna cover for with the whole reason why Bubblegum and Makima comparison is just completely superficial on the surface, and why Shadow and Makima make more sense than comparing her to Bubblegum, because again, they were both shaped to be weapons, while Bubblegum was never shaped to be a weapon to begin with. She chose that life, and why, like I mentioned before, Shadow is just a reflection of Makima. She met the right kind of person, and she's just a reflection of Shadow if he never met Maria, basically. So
Yeah.
that's essentially that. So yeah.
Pretty much that's basically what it is. Just like Princess Bubblegum defenders. Fuck you. That's all I had to say. Fuck you. Okay, that
And
would be
fuck the
the end.
Princess Bubblegum defenders, and fuck the people who keep attacking circumstantial villains who truly need help instead of just being further pushed down.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
fuck the people who keep condemning her without acknowledging that. So it's like, yeah.
Very much. So that will be it. That will
All
be
right,
for
that's
all.
all.
Like, subscribe,
That'll be
share,
all.
shit post, I guess, comment, whatever. See you guys another time.